My daughter never rang the doorbell 3 times unless she wanted something from me. That morning in San Jose, the knocks came one after another, sharp, urgent, almost irritated. I knew before I even reached the hallway that trouble was standing on the other side. I set my half-finished cup of lemon tea on the counter and walked slowly through the quiet house. Through the living room window, I saw Liana's white crossover parked crookedly along the curb, the kind of careless parking she had always done when she felt entitled to everything around her. She had inherited her father's confidence, but none of his discipline, and she lived in a world where other people existed only to solve her problems. When I opened the door, she brushed past me without a hug, without a greeting, just an empty air kiss toward my cheek, as if she were being filmed. "Mom, we need to talk," she said flatly. She marched straight into my kitchen, sat in my chair, and pulled a thick folder from her tote bag. Her fingers tapped impatiently on the table while she kept scrolling on her phone. "Can you make coffee? I'm exhausted," she muttered without looking up. I made it out of habit, my body moving as if on old programming. Years of marriage to a man who expected service before words had trained me too well. Even after Arthur died, the habits stayed inside me like permanent fingerprints. When I placed the cup in front of her, I finally asked, "How's Tyler? And the kids?" "They're fine," she replied bluntly, already sliding the folder toward me. "Anyway, let me get straight to it. I need your help." The clock on the kitchen wall ticked so slowly that every second felt heavy. "Tyler's in trouble. Serious trouble," she continued. "He trusted the wrong people in a business investment. We don't have time for long explanations, so here." I opened the folder. Loan notices, bank statements, a contract in bold red letters. $300,000. My heart stuttered. "Liana," I whispered, "that's almost everything I have." She finally looked at me. Her eyes, once so bright when she was a little girl dancing in the living room, had hardened into something cold and calculating. "Mom, come on. You live alone. Your expenses are nothing. You have retirement money just sitting there. You don't need it." She took a sip of coffee, unfazed by my silence. "You're almost 70. What are you saving it for?" The words hit me like a slap. "This isn't the first time you've asked, sweetheart," I said quietly. "And every time you helped us," she shot back. "So don't start acting dramatic now. Tyler needs to pay this by tomorrow. These aren't friendly lenders, Mom." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "I need the money today. You'll transfer it before the bank closes." Her tone sharpened, the same tone Arthur had used for years whenever he wanted control and obedience. I felt the old fear rise in me, the instinct to give in, to stay quiet, to make the storm pass. But beneath that fear, something else stirred. A question, a flicker of resistance. "Liana, I need time to think." "There is no time," she snapped, rising from her chair. She walked behind me, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "Don't let me down, Mom." The hand didn't feel like comfort. It felt like possession. And as she walked out the door, promising to return tonight to finish everything, I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the folder. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of the end. Not of my life, but of the life I had been trapped in for decades. For a long moment after Liana left, I just stood there in the middle of my quiet kitchen, the ticking clock suddenly louder than the world outside. $300,000. The number felt unreal, like something printed on a fictional bill. But the dread in my chest was painfully real. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I scrolled past missed calls from Liana and finally tapped the one name that had stayed constant for more than 40 years. Serena. She picked up on the second ring, Evelyn, you never call this early. What's wrong? My voice cracked before the words came out. Serena, I need help. She arrived at my house an hour later, still in her navy suit from the courthouse, her hair pulled back in the same tight bun she had worn since our college days. Serena never rushed, never panicked, never acted without calculation. But the moment she walked into my kitchen, saw the folder, and heard everything, her calm expression fractured. You're leaving, she said firmly, closing the folder with a sharp snap. You're leaving this house tonight. What? Serena, No, listen to me. She placed both hands on my shoulders. This is beyond helping your daughter. This is criminal debt. And the people involved in this kind of lending do not care that you're an elderly widow living quietly in San Jose. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. She said Tyler trusted the wrong people. She said it was an investment. Serena shook her head. I've seen 3 of these contracts in the past month alone. They're tied to a dangerous finance ring running through the South Bay, and if Liana is asking you for $300,000, the real number might be higher. Higher? The room swayed slightly. But she lied, Serena said bluntly. She is drowning in this with him, and she wants to drag you under with her. Her words were harsh, but true. I pressed a hand to my forehead. I don't know what to do. She said they'd come after all of us if we didn't pay. Serena exhaled slowly, then reached for her bag. Here's what we're going to do. First, you'll transfer your savings to a protected account Liana knows nothing about. Then I'll file a temporary representation notice at the courthouse, so all future communication has to come through me. After that, we pack your essentials and leave before she comes back tonight. I've never just left, I whispered. Serena knelt beside me, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. Evelyn, you have spent your entire life being afraid of Arthur's temper, afraid of disappointing your daughter, afraid of being alone. But look around, you're already alone. The only difference is you've been suffering in silence. I felt my throat tighten. You deserve a life that isn't built on fear, she said. I nodded, still trembling. Where would I go? I have a small cabin in New Mexico, empty most of the year. Quiet, safe. You'll stay there with me until we figure out the rest. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. She'll be furious, Serena. Let her be. It's time you stop living for her rage. Serena stood, grabbed her keys, and opened her briefcase. Let's go, she said, before fear convinces you to stay. The bank manager looked at me strangely when I asked to transfer the entire balance of my savings into a new account. I kept my voice steady, repeating what Serena had instructed. No mailed statements, no linked contacts, no digital notifications. Nothing that could lead my daughter to it. Are you sure, Mrs. Cole? He asked gently. This is a substantial amount. I'm sure, I said, though my hands trembled around the pen. Serena stood beside me, calm and sharp, her presence giving me a courage I did not yet believe in. Once the transfer was complete, she collected all the paperwork, placed it into her briefcase, and nodded at me. It's done. Let's go. From the bank, we drove straight to a notary office where Serena filed emergency representation forms. For the first time in my life, I had legal protection separating me from my own child, an odd, painful relief. At home, the late afternoon sun was bleeding through the curtains when I began to pack. I moved slowly, touching every item as if saying goodbye, not just to the house, but to every version of myself that had lived inside it. I packed a few clothes, my blood pressure medication, the birthstone necklace my mother gave me, and a small stack of photographs from before Arthur had drained the light out of my smile. Serena stood in the doorway with a list in hand. Essentials only. Sentimental things, too, if they won't weigh you down emotionally. I paused at a framed picture of Liana at age 6, missing teeth and holding a melting ice cream cone, laughing in the summer sun. I almost put it in the suitcase. Almost. Then I carefully set it back down. When everything was ready, I wrote a short note and placed it on the kitchen table. Nothing dramatic, just a single truth I had avoided for years. I am choosing peace. Do not look for me. At the airport, Serena purchased 2 last-minute tickets to Albuquerque. Her efficiency contrasted sharply with the hurricane of my emotions. As we boarded, I felt like a runaway at 68, terrified and strangely relieved all at once. We landed under a sweep of dark New Mexico sky. The desert air was dry and sharp, carrying a quiet that felt foreign after decades of living in a crowded city. Serena drove us to her small adobe cabin on the outskirts of Santa Fe, tucked between sagebrush and silence. That night, after a rushed dinner and exhausted showers, I switched on my phone for the first time since leaving San Jose. 17 missed calls from Liana. 5 from Tyler. The voicemails started with sweetness. "Mom, please call me. I know you're overwhelmed." Then shifted to irritation. "Are you seriously ignoring me?" Then anger. "Do not make this harder." And finally, a message that sent cold through my veins. "If the debt isn't paid, they'll come for all of us. They know where you live." My fingers shook as I turned off the phone. When I looked at Serena, she already knew. "You're safe here," she said. But as I lay awake in the darkness of the cabin that night, listening to the wind scrape across the dry earth, I wondered if safety was still a place I could reach. For the first time in decades, my mornings belonged only to me. No one shouting from another room. No demands disguised as affection. No footsteps pacing in anger. The desert air outside Serena's cabin felt like a clean, sharp contrast to the life I had left behind in San Jose. Within a week, Serena insisted I needed something to ground me, something that wasn't fear. She drove me into town and introduced me to the owners of a small craft store tucked beside a pottery shop. They needed someone part-time, someone patient and gentle with detail. I started the next morning. Folding linens and arranging embroidery kits felt strangely healing. The women who came in, tourists, retirees, artists, talked to me as if I were simply another human being. Not a resource, not a lifeline, not a bank. Just Evelyn. On weekends, I set up a small table at the local market, displaying the embroidered pieces I had sewn quietly at the cabin, while trying to steady my nerves at night. People bought them. They said my stitches were delicate, my patterns comforting. The praise felt like sunlight on a part of me that had not seen warmth in years. But peace never lasts long when danger is still moving in the shadows of another state. 2 weeks after my arrival, my phone rang while I was closing up the craft store. The caller ID read San Jose Detective Bureau. My heart faltered. "This is Detective Ramos," the voice said once I answered. "Mrs. Cole, are you in a safe place?" The question alone made my knees weaken. "Yes," I whispered. "I think so. I need to inform you of something. During our review of financial documents connected to your daughter and her husband, several accounts were found in your name. Accounts with your signature." "That can't be," I said quickly. "I never—" "We believe your signature was forged," he continued gently. "There are also pending transactions tied to a loan network under investigation. Your daughter's name appears repeatedly." I pressed my hand to my forehead as dizziness washed over me. "Detective?" I said slowly. "Are you telling me Liana used my identity?" There was a pause on the other end. A heavy, confirming pause. "We believe your daughter played a central role in obtaining illegal loans. She and her husband may have used your credit, your name, and your retirement details. We need an official witness statement from you." I felt the craft store spinning around me, the rows of thread and cloth blurring into indistinct color. When? I managed. As soon as possible. We can arrange for an Albuquerque liaison to meet you. I hung up and walked outside to the dusty parking lot, leaning against Serena's car. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Serena arrived minutes later, having sensed something was wrong from the moment she saw my face. "What happened?" she asked, gripping my arms. I told her everything, every word, every forged document, every loan tied to my name. Serena didn't breathe for a full second. Then her jaw tightened. "This is worse than we thought," she said quietly. "Liana didn't just fall into Tyler's mess, she helped create it. And she dragged you into it deliberately." "I can't believe she would do that," I whispered. "She's my daughter." "She is," Serena said gently. "But she's not the daughter you remember. Fear changes people. Greed twists them. And desperation destroys whatever humanity is left." That night, I sat at the cabin dining table with a blank statement form in front of me. The words did not come easily. Writing them down felt like carving open an old wound that never healed correctly. The little girl who once slipped her hand into mine at the grocery store no longer existed. And the woman she had become was now tangled in crimes that threatened to pull me under with her. I picked up the pen. For the first time in my life, I chose to protect myself. 3 mornings after I gave my statement to the Albuquerque liaison, the desert seemed unusually still. Even the wind had gone quiet. Serena had gone into town for court work, leaving me alone at the cabin for the afternoon. I brewed tea, opened the screen door, and stepped onto the small porch to breathe the warm air. That was when I saw him. A tall man stood at the bottom of the gravel driveway, hands shaking, clothes wrinkled, face drawn tight with exhaustion. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. But then the fading tattoo on his forearm caught the sunlight, and my stomach dropped. "Tyler," I whispered. He took a step forward, stumbling slightly. "Mrs. Cole, please, please don't go inside." My hand hovered over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed danger. "How did you find me?" My voice trembled despite my effort to steady it. "I'm not here to hurt you," he rasped. "I swear. I came to warn you." I froze. "Warn me about what?" He looked over his shoulder as though someone might appear from the sagebrush at any moment. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his breathing sounded strained. "Liana knows you left," he said. "She's furious. Beyond furious. She blames you for everything, and she's not thinking clearly anymore." I felt my throat tighten. "What do you mean?" Tyler pressed a shaking hand against his chest. "She told the wrong people that you still have money. Real money. She said you were refusing to help. She said the debt was your fault. She dragged me into this mess, and now she's sinking deeper every day." He sank onto the ground as if his legs could no longer hold him. "It's not 300,000 anymore," he whispered. "It's more than double. And they're coming after all of us." My pulse roared in my ears. I stepped back, reaching behind me blindly for the screen door. "Tyler, you need to leave," I stammered. "I can call someone to—" "No," he gasped, lifting his hands. "Please. Call the police. Just not for me. For you. They're looking for you. They think you have money stored away. Liana told them you ran because you're hiding it." My chest constricted. "She told them that?" He nodded, tears streaking down his dirty face. "She said you owe her. She said you took her inheritance. She said everything her father built was meant for her and you stole it." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Tyler's voice cracked. "I barely escaped. I don't know how long before they track me here. Please, Mrs. Cole, please call the police. I did. Within minutes, 2 sheriff's cars pulled up the gravel road. Officers placed Tyler in protective custody while taking down every detail of his frantic confession. When Serena arrived, the cabin was surrounded by flashing lights, radios crackling in the dry air. She ran to me. Evelyn, what happened? I looked at her, my voice hollow. She's not just in trouble anymore, Serena. She's dangerous. That night, long after the officers left and the desert went dark again, I sat awake in the silent cabin. It was the first time I admitted to myself that my daughter's love had turned into something unrecognizable, and something that might very well get me killed. By the next morning, the quiet stretch of desert around Serena's cabin no longer felt comforting. It felt like a thin shell around something dangerous, pressing in from all sides. I woke up to the sound of Serena arguing on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and sharp. When she hung up, she turned to me with a look I had never seen on her face before. Evelyn, she said carefully, pack a bag. You're being moved into temporary protection. Today. The words struck with the force of a blow. Protection? I whispered. From my own daughter? Serena didn't answer. She didn't have to. 2 officers arrived within the hour and drove us to Albuquerque, where a small, discreet apartment had been prepared. 1 entrance, 1 emergency exit. Security lights that blinked like stern eyes watching the hallways. This is just until we know more, Detective Ramos assured me. But the truth was, more kept coming. The following day, he returned with thick folders containing new findings. My hands trembled as he laid them on the table. Mrs. Cole, he began, we've uncovered additional loan documents. They were issued using your Social Security number, your retirement account, and details from your medical insurance files. My lungs tightened. Liana took those from my house. She said she needed them for school records. Serena muttered under her breath. She used you like an ATM with no limits. Detective Ramos continued. Based on what we've found so far, your daughter was the primary applicant for at least 4 separate loans. Tyler's involvement appears to be secondary. We believe she initiated most of the fraud. I shook my head slowly, the room tilting. No, she wouldn't do that. Liana might be reckless, but she isn't. I swallowed, unable to finish the thought. She is, Serena said quietly. Evelyn, you saw the danger in her eyes. I saw it too. That night, alone in the small apartment, I replayed every moment of Liana's childhood. The scraped knees, the school recitals, the nights she crawled into my bed after Arthur yelled too loud. I remembered the softness, the innocence, the way she once clung to me with absolute trust. Where had that little girl gone? The next morning, I woke to a flurry of calls from Serena's paralegal. Liana has been calling our office nonstop, she said, leaving messages, threatening legal action, saying you owe her everything. She even accused Serena of kidnapping you. My stomach dropped. But then came the worst part. Detective Ramos called minutes later. We believe your daughter is attempting to track your location. We intercepted communication between her and an unknown male. There's talk about finding the old woman before the cops do. The floor beneath my feet felt like water. Evelyn, Serena said firmly, gripping my hands, listen to me. This isn't your fault. Your daughter is making decisions you cannot control. But the guilt was already rising like a tide I couldn't stop. The officers made their plan clear. We suspect she will send someone. We are preparing an undercover operation. A coldness settled deep into my bones. My daughter, the baby I raised with trembling hands, was now orchestrating something that sounded disturbingly close to hunting me down. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if loving her had blinded me more than fear ever had. The days that followed felt like waiting inside the eye of a storm. Quiet, unnatural, tense. The kind of silence that makes you listen for footsteps you pray you never hear. The Albuquerque officers briefed us each morning. They were calm, methodical, professional. I tried to mirror their steadiness, but my nerves were stretched so thin that even the hum of the refrigerator startled me. Their plan was simple in structure, terrifying in execution. I would resume something resembling my normal routine: grocery shopping, short walks, a visit to the craft market. Act as though I had no idea danger was closing in. Undercover officers would blend in around me, watching, waiting. Someone would come. They were certain of it. The thought alone made my palms sweat. On the second day, nothing happened. I walked through a crowded farmer's market while Serena pretended to browse pottery nearby. An undercover officer sold lemonade. Another sat on a bench pretending to tie his shoe. Nothing. On the third day, still nothing. I allowed myself to breathe again, just a little. Then came the fourth morning. I was tending the small potted herbs outside the apartment building when I felt it, that prickling sensation along my spine that told me someone was watching. Slowly, I looked toward the street. A man leaned casually against a utility pole across from the building. He was dressed plainly, gray shirt, faded jeans, but his eyes were fixed on me with a quiet intensity that made my skin crawl. He didn't look away, not even when our eyes met. Fear tightened around my ribs. I stepped back inside, my heart pounding, and gently closed the door. The undercover cleaning woman, really Officer Harper, looked up immediately. "It's him," I whispered. "I'm almost certain." She didn't question me. She tapped her earpiece and gave a low signal. "Stay inside. Do not open the door unless I tell you." I sat on the sofa, staring at the doorknob, every second stretching into an hour. I could feel him out there, could feel the threat like humidity in the air pressing against the windows. 30 minutes passed before the knock came. A hesitant tap. Then two more, harder. "Mrs. Cole?" a man's voice called. "I have a message from your daughter." My blood turned cold. Officer Harper mouthed, "Don't move." Within seconds, 3 officers emerged from hiding, one from the bathroom, one from the stairwell, one from behind the building. The door swung open and they tackled the man before he could take a step inside. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He simply exhaled like someone relieved to be caught. When Detective Ramos arrived, he looked heavier than I'd ever seen him. "We have his statement," he said after questioning the man for nearly an hour. "He confessed everything." I sat rigid in my chair. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "What did she ask him to do?" I whispered. Ramos hesitated. "She told him to come here, force entry if needed, and scare you." Her words were, "Make sure she understands this isn't optional." She promised him $5,000 for it. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. Was he supposed to harm me? Ramos's face grew stern. "He said she instructed him to leave you with a few bruises. Nothing fatal, just enough to make you fear her." My entire body went numb. My daughter. My own child. That night, Serena stayed with me. Neither of us spoke much. Some pain doesn't need conversation. It hangs in the air like smoke. 2 days later, officers arrested Liana at a motel outside San Jose. She had been hiding, planning her next move, spiraling in fear and anger. The evidence against her was overwhelming: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, solicitation of violence. The moment I heard the news, a strange mix of relief and grief washed over me. Months later, I stood in a courtroom in Northern California, giving testimony against the girl I once rocked to sleep. My voice trembled, but did not break. I spoke of every loan, every manipulation, every forged document. I spoke of the fear, the betrayal, the night she sent a man to my door. Liana refused to meet my eyes. The rage that had once burned so brightly in her now smoldered into something small and hollow. When the verdict was read, guilty on all major counts, I felt no triumph, only a deep, aching sorrow, but also something else, something I had not felt in decades. Freedom. The months after the trial felt strangely silent, not peaceful at first, just empty, like the aftermath of a long storm when the broken branches are still scattered across the yard. I moved into a small apartment in Albuquerque, a second-floor unit with a balcony that faced the sunrise. Every morning, the light spilled gently across the wooden railing, and for the first time in years, I felt the faint beginning of calm. My embroidery work grew into something steady. The market sellers began saving a corner table for me each Saturday. Women bought my pieces and asked me how long I had been sewing. I always smiled and said, most of my life, but only recently for myself. Serena visited often. Sometimes she'd bring takeout. Sometimes just conversation. Sometimes she came simply to sit beside me in companionable silence. We didn't have to talk about Liana. Her name hovered between us, unspoken, yet always present. One afternoon in early spring, as I sorted threads by color, the mail carrier buzzed my apartment. A small envelope slid through the slot. The handwriting on it froze me. Liana. For a long moment, I simply stared, my heart thudding in a slow, heavy rhythm. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Another part, the mother part that stubbornly refused to die, needed to know. Inside was a letter written in a hand I barely recognized, slanted, slower, as if each word had been dragged through thick mud. Mom, I know you have no reason to read this, but I hope you will. I am attending therapy here. The therapist says I need to see the truth about what I did, not just what I think I meant to do. I've spent weeks trying to understand how I became someone who hurt you. There's no excuse. I don't ask forgiveness. I just don't want to be the person I was. Tyler and I are not together anymore. I think we both ruined each other. I don't blame you for anything. I hope you find peace. I hope one day I can be someone you aren't afraid to speak to. Liana. I sat on the edge of my bed, the letter trembling between my fingers. Grief, anger, relief, love, sorrow, everything tangled into one unbearable knot. But beneath it all, I sensed something unfamiliar. Detachment. Not coldness, not resentment, just the knowledge that my happiness no longer depended on saving her. It was Serena who encouraged me to respond. You can write without going back, she said. Boundaries and compassion can exist together. So I wrote a short letter. Liana, I received your message. I am glad you are seeking help. Healing takes time and honesty. I hope you continue both. I wish you peace and clarity. Evelyn. Weeks passed. I deliberately didn't expect a reply. Instead, I placed my energy where it finally mattered, on rebuilding myself. I joined a support group for older women who survived financial and emotional abuse. I told my story. They told theirs. Together, we stitched ourselves back into wholeness, thread by thread. By summer, I had begun mentoring new members. Women whose eyes carried the same fear mine once had. Women who whispered their secrets like confessions. Women who believed it was too late for them to start over. I looked at them and knew the truth. Starting over is not tied to age. It is tied to courage. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky gold and violet, I sat on my balcony, and let the warm wind brush against my face. I thought of Liana, not with anger, not with blind hope, but with acceptance. She would walk her own path. I would walk mine. Whether those paths ever crossed again was something time and healing would decide. The lesson I carried into my 70s was simple and painfully earned. Love cannot survive where fear and control live. And sometimes the bravest act a mother can do is step away, not to punish, but to save herself. It is never too late to stop being who others demand you to be. It is never too late to begin again. In the end, I learned something I wish I had understood decades earlier. Loving someone does not mean surrendering your freedom, your safety, or your dignity. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left of me. Now I know that real love cannot exist where fear and control have taken root. Walking away from my daughter was the hardest choice I ever made, but it was also the first step toward reclaiming my own life. Healing takes time. Forgiveness takes courage, and boundaries are a form of love too, especially the love we owe ourselves. At 70, I finally discovered that starting over is not a matter of age, but a matter of truth. And now I want to ask you, what lesson did you take from my story, and where are you watching from today?